the numbers, which is to say, I think it's probably fair to say the economy looks pretty good from where we are right now, and yet then there's the question of how people feel.
Right.
What do you think about the distinction between those two and how these issues are articulated on the campaign trail?
What is that old saying? It's not how you look, it's how you feel. I mean, I think that's exactly what we're talking about here, because if you look at all the economic data, 14 million new jobs, I mean, corporate profits up, the stock market at record highs, things look pretty good. Inflation's coming down. But if you look at groceries, gas prices, and housing, people are still feeling the pain. And so the question really is going to be whether or not the consumer index, which is higher now than it's been at any point in the Biden presidency, if that is going to be the predominant factor, people are getting more confident, or if this malaise that people are feeling is going to not dissipate enough by November. And it's always a race. President Obama, when he was running for re-election in 2011, was kind of experiencing a little bit of the same thing. The economy was improving, but people weren't feeling it. By the time the election came in 2012, they were, and so he was reelected. The question now is whether that's going to happen before time runs out.
Marc, do you think time's going to run out?
I don't know. I think the reality is that the prices have increased across the board from the time that Biden became president to now by 17.9%. And there's a lot of hangover those first couple of years. Steve's right that it's begun to come down. And for the first time, real wages are actually increasing. But that's a lot of memory over the last 3 years for people to have to erase in this election year. But look, if they actually begin to reduce rates and the economy continues to grow, I think that it could be a plus for Biden by the time we get to November. But right now, it certainly is a drag for him. And I think people look fondly at the Trump years and believe that we grew the economy. Many jobs came back with the corporate tax relief that was passed in 2017. And so I do think that the economy right now remains a big advantage for Donald Trump.
When we, Marc, I think, and Steve, I guess there's a difference between inflation coming down and prices coming down, because the prices are locked much, much higher. And now, if inflation's coming down from 4 or 5 to 3.5, the increases we've already seen, they're increasing more by 3.5 instead of 5. That doesn't. Andrew, I have, I'm from a two working house. I'm at the supermarket a lot because I get off early. I have sticker shock every day, Marc. I have sticker shock. I bought some chicken yesterday, thin sliced chicken, $14. It was $8 a year ago, honestly, or a year and a half ago. Everything that I scan costs $7. And I'm telling you, Marc and Steve, people's paychecks are not where they're not covering what they covered 3 years ago, Steve. They're not.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Joe, there's no doubt you're right about that. The reality is, again, real wages are significantly down from when Joe Biden became president. And cumulatively, as you say, it's roughly 18% that prices have increased across the board, whereas during the 4 years of Trump's presidency, it was about 7.5%. So there's no doubt that inflation is the biggest drag that Joe Biden has to fight right now.
And Steve, don't you think immigration is the abortion issue of 2024?
Immigration is definitely an issue. I think the Biden administration was benefited by the fact that Congress, when there was a bipartisan immigration bill presented that was written by a Republican from Oklahoma who's no, lefty blue guy, when the speaker just said, look, we're not even going to consider it. We'd rather have a problem to campaign on than a solution, even though, the border crisis is out of control. The president should say every single day, I will sign a bill and I will close the border if Congress sends it to me.
You could do it with executive orders. You know that. You know that. You know that. You're not purple. You're as Marc. He's as blue as the bluest sky I've ever seen. You can't give cover to Joe Biden about. You cannot give cover about 7.2 million people that are in this country now. What?
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that immigration is not a big problem for Democrats. It is. It's a big problem for the country, and instead of taking a solution, and letting the Congress chose the perfect being the enemy of the good. They think they have a better solution, but the Republicans in the Senate would say they'll never get a solution like that as long as there's a democracy in America, which, by the way, is a legitimate question going forward, but that's probably for another show.
Oh, come on.
Hey, Marc, let me ask I want to ask both of you a money question, but it's actually a fundraising question. Clearly, President Biden is winning in the fundraising category. President Trump obviously also has a whole bunch of legal problems, which are also costing him quite a small fortune. Maybe he'll be able to get some more money out of the RNC, but the RNC's struggle to raise money itself. How do you see the money piece of this playing itself out as it relates to the campaign?
My two cents is I think that Joe Biden.
I'm going to start with Marc.
My 2 cents, Andrew, is I think that there will continue to be an advantage for Joe Biden. I think he will significantly out fundraise Donald Trump. I think there's still many donors who are reluctant to get back behind the former president. But at the same time, I think sometimes the media makes a bigger issue of this than it is, because Donald Trump has an amazing ability to get press coverage without needing to pay for it. And I think the reality is, you've seen in 2016, 2020, he had a pretty small campaign. I anticipate he will again. And so I think that he's not going to need the same resources to get the media attention that often is what you're paying for.
Oh, Steve, can you, I know you said it's for a different time, but can you just tell me exactly how Trump's going to end democracy? Is it going to be with the is he going to take the military and not leave? Or, I mean, when you say that, are you serious? You don't think the Constitution?
First of all, can you tell me whether or not he'll accept the election results? He won't even say whether he'll do that.
You mean like Stacey Abrams or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton in the past that you have a right to ask whether mail-ins had a problem. You have a right to question whether it's a fair outcome. And Democrats have done it again and again and again over the years. So how is he actually going to end democracy that we've had since 1776? Tell me how he's going to do that.
Yes. First of all, I think he's been telegraphing how he's going to do that. He's going to use the military at the border. He's going to use the military in cities. He's going to do things that, frankly, aren't permitted under the law today. And he's already telling people he's going to do that. And you're absolutely right. He has every right to challenge the election results. But when you file 63 lawsuits and you lose 61, many from judges that you appointed, then I think there's a point at which you have to say, I need to accept the outcome of this election. And you don't fight, you don't cause an insurrection.
Guys like John Thune or Mike Johnson, any of these Republicans that are supporting Trump, what do you think they're thinking? Are they treasonous? Are they stupid?
I think they're cowed. I think you should. I mean, listen, Marc's boss, a patriot who stood and defended democracy, said that Donald Trump should not be president again because of what he did on that day and in the days that followed.
Right, but if it comes between Biden and there's an article today.
I understand, but you just asked.
Okay, when a push comes to shove, all these Haley people are going to eventually vote for Trump. Marc, are you voting for Trump? Even though what happened with Mike Pence, are you backing Trump for this election?
Joe, I think that everything that Donald Trump did leading up to January 6th was dead wrong. And I think I've obviously had to testify to that effect. But I think that your point is well taken. The reality is that I think both sides have been working to undermine faith that voters have in elections. And Hillary Clinton referred to Donald Trump as an illegitimate president in 2016.
Yeah,
and many
so
people
I don't remember Hillary Clinton or any other candidate or former president talk about trying to have their own vice president hung. So this is a lot of the American public looks at this and goes, I don't understand what's happening here.
But was that?
Yeah.
That's, you know.
Yeah, Andrew, I mean, I obviously lived that day very personally, so I understand. I was part of the team that was evacuated. And so, as I said, I've had to testify that fact. But I do think that the Democrats use a lot of hyperbole about ending democracy that I don't know is helpful. I think that the reality is a lot of Americans are concerned of what is inflation today? What are you going to do to help me bring down prices? What's the economic outlook going to look like? What are you going to do to secure the border?
I think
those are the issues that people are going to vote about.